David started his career as an early employee at HP and went on to become a product manager at Apple, succeeding Steve Jobs and even managing Steve Wozniak for a while. He's a prominent speaker in the product community and the author of How to Build Insanely Great Products and much more. With over 50 years of experience, he's built 75 plus products and founded 11 startups. Today we're diving into the secrets of building insanely great products, understanding your customers, finding your unique value proposition, and mastering stakeholder management. And get ready because David will also reveal the 16 areas of innovation every product manager should know about. Ever heard the myth that Steve Jobs never engaged in user research? Well, we're going to uncover the truth today, but first, let's start with the most important question. David, how can I build insanely great products?
Well, the first thing to do is to put together your product market strategy. That is the strategy for your product in the marketplace. And that's the S in SPICE stands for strategy. That is 30. There's 32 parts to that, and I describe the 32 parts of it in my books. Um, and it begins with understanding what it is that the customer wants to do. Why do they want to do it? When do they want to do it? Where do they want to do it? How do they want to do it? What's standing in their way? How important is it to get it done? And most importantly, how satisfied are they with the current way of doing things? And given all that, then if you bring to bear innovation, then you could build a product that has a value proposition and has a perfect market product market fit, which are other terms that people are using, which is further down the road than understanding what it is that the customer wants to do. And like they said, if you can't go out and ask your customers what they want, and there's the story of Henry Ford, went out and asked people if they wanted an affordable car. Most of them did not know what an affordable car is, so they said no. And then if the internet existed and he did keyword research as to how many people were searching for car on the internet, he would have found out that there was absolutely no market whatsoever for the Model T. But if he just sat on the stoop of a saloon in Dearborn, Michigan, not far from where I grew up, he would have noticed people whipping their horses to gallop through town faster or pull their little carriages faster. And he says, I know what they need. They need a faster horse, which is what they would tell him when he asked them if they wanted a car. They would say, no, I want a faster horse. So that's part of the reason why he might have named it the horseless carriage. And the reason you can't ask people what they want or what they need is because they have to understand what the problem is that they're trying to solve, what it is that they want to do. And then they have to invent the solution to that problem. And most people can't do that. So, when the cuckoo clock was invented, how many people imagined they wanted to put the cuckoo clock on their wrist and call it a wristwatch? Very few people. Uh, so that's why I say understand what it is that the customer wants to do. Then the next step is go out and interview 40 to 80 people in your target market and then put together a random sample for your target market of like 800 to 1,500 people or prospective business customers and survey them. Then using that, you can tell whether or not you could build a product for them and at what price point, because you'd be asking them what it would be worth to them to buy that kind of thing. And you can project what profits you could make, given figuring out what it would cost to build it, and what your return on investment might be, and then you can go out and take that to whoever you want to fund the development of that product and service. And then you do the market research, the competitive research, the definition of your personas, which is you can get from those surveys and interviews. Put together your product positioning, your sales plan, your marketing plan, your engineering plan, your distribution plan, your support plan, your training plan, and your pricing strategy, and your product line strategy, and how you can extend the product line over a time period into the future. Those are all the major components that go into your product market strategy. And when you have that together, which will take you at least 3 to 6 months calendar time, because of the time required to do the interviews and do the surveys, then turn that picture of what the product should be over to your engineering and development team and let them build the product for that target market. So that, in my mind, is very key to a product success. I wish I knew that 50 years ago, and I would have helped avoid quite a few failures.
Oh God, that's very precise. Um, you touched on it briefly, but how can we understand what our customers really want? I mean, should we ask them, observe them, run a survey? What kind of tools do we have in our disposal to know exactly what they want?
Well, you have four tools, and I've mentioned them. First, you go out and observe them, like Henry Ford should observe people whipping their horses. You act like a social anthropologist, just observe what people are doing, or what companies, if you're B2B, are doing. Then you do the interviews. That lets you also massage and edit the interviewing instrument, which you turn into a survey. Then you do the survey. And then if you have big data and analytics and artificial intelligence available, you can then analyze the big data. And if there's data about the subject, then you can utilize that in your product market strategy.
Oh, definitely. And you mentioned about unique value proposition. How can we know that we have a winning unique value proposition?
If you've got a series of things that your product will do that you know the customer finds it's very important to do, and you find that the existing products or services in the marketplace do not do those things well, that is, the customers are generally not satisfied with it, then you know you're going to have a value proposition of doing those things that are not served well by the current products in the market, and you'll have a successful product.
And what do you think is the difference between, or the skills between a good product manager and a great product manager?
Well, first, knowing how to get that process of understanding what your customer wants to do done also has mediation skills, are able to resolve conflicts that occur between people and resources within the organization and between organizations within the organization. And third, they're persuasive. They can convince others of why what they're arguing for is the best course for them and for the company. And one of the ways they do that is when they first take over a product, the first thing they should do is go and sit down with the other stakeholders. If it's a senior enough product, the president, the vice president, the CFO, the head of sales, the head of marketing, the head of engineering, and then all the members of their team, the other product managers on their team, all of the engineers, and all of your liaison people with marketing and sales and support and purchasing. And one of the things you do when you have lunch with each of them, and it takes several weeks to get that done, is you ask them what is their personal goals. Because if you can help them accomplish their personal goals, they'll be happier than if they're not able to get their personal goals done. With that knowledge at hand, when the time comes to mediate a dispute, you're able to appeal to the personal goals of each of the individuals that you've met, and you know where their behind the scenes thinking is coming from, and you're able to manage them to get the outcome that you're trying to accomplish.
That's such a great advice. Stakeholder management is one of the things in our community that they always ask for help. And you mentioned this epic meeting with John Scully and the rest of the guys out on the table. And it's really hard to manage executive. And you again, we always joke that we are have influence without authority, and you came to that meeting and you ask for budget and you ask for authority. Do you have any advice for product manager to manage such an intense meeting?
Now, there's a PowerPoint template up on my website at spicecatalyst.com, and it's contained in a blog called Ask for the Authority. I think it's Quit Whining and Ask for the Authority. And here's an example of managing your team. I had introduced the Apple III Plus at Comdex in November of 1983 because we had like 5 or 6 thousand of them we needed to sell. And if we didn't introduce the product, we would never sell it, and the company would take a loss. Well, Steve Jobs heard about that. He didn't like that idea. So I got a call from my boss when I was out in the field. I was in Southern California calling on dealers. And nothing pisses me off more than when I'm on the front line fighting a war to sell the Apple IIIs to be called back on a stupid explanation as to why did we introduce the 3 Plus and why can't we withdraw the press release, which was Steve Jobs' idea. But we already told all the dealers that the 3 Plus is coming out in early December. So I had to fly back to Cupertino. This was like on a Monday or Tuesday, and then I got an email from the VP of Sales asking me if I could cancel the email that was about to be sent out announcing the 3 Plus to all the dealers. And I wrote back and I said, I'm sorry, Gene. I can't do it because the email's already been put into the system and it's scheduled to go out Friday morning at 10 a.m. and I can't stop it. There's no mechanism in the Apple email system to delete an email that hasn't been sent yet, or even afterwards. Now, I was in a group at HP Product Management. One of my fellow product managers was managing HP Mail, which is an email system. And at that time, only Apple and IBM and HP had internal email systems. And Apple was called, I think, Apple Link. And I knew that Gene, the VP of sales, did not use it because he did not know how to type. So if he wanted something sent out, he'd probably dictate it to his secretary who would type it up. And if he needed to read his email, she would print it off and hand it to him. So I knew that he did not know that I was telling a little lie about the inability to curtail that email from going out, that announcement going out. And about 10 years ago, we had an Apple reunion. And I went up to Gene and I said, Gene, I need to apologize. He says, for what? What's wrong? And I told him that story and I told him I lied to you. But hope I had to sell the Apple IIIs. That was responsibility. And he laughed and he put his hand on my shoulder and he says, what do they call it? I bless you, my son, or I forgive you, my son. Because I asked him for forgiveness. So sometimes you got to do stuff like that to get your job done because the bureaucracy,
Yeah.
which had different objectives than what you have, was blocking those objectives from getting accomplished.
Oh, wow. I mean, thank you so much for sharing the story. I have another question about Apple. Steve Jobs always portrayed in this media and that this visionary that did not do any user research or user testing. That's the excuse that some of a product manager push against. Like, no, we have to be a visionary. How much of that is truth and how much of that is just a PR machine and fiction?
It's fiction. There's a story up on a blog article on my website, spicecatalyst.com, about whether or not Apple did market research. And it was a piece written by Jenny Saul, who worked in market research at Apple at the times that Steve was saying we don't do market research. And she was one of 50 people in primary market research at Apple at the
Wow.
time. And so part of the reason I think he said that was to create fear, uncertainty, and doubt in our competitors' minds. So a number of our competitors, like Commodore and others, said, well, if Apple's not doing market research, we shouldn't bother doing it ourselves. And those companies like Tandem and not Tandem, the first portable PC, I forget the name of that company offhand, and Commodore, they're no longer in business. And that's because they didn't do any market research. But we did quite a bit. And when one of the market researchers, Ken Lim, that used to work for me when I was at a market research company called DataQuest in 1985, a few years later, he went to work for corporate market research at Apple and stayed there, I don't know, 5, 10 years. So no, they did it, and one of the interesting visionary things about Steve Jobs, and he was not the only visionary at Apple. He did not invent the Macintosh; it was invented by another guy. That He was a keen observer of human behavior. So he was spotted hiding behind the bushes when I think the iPhone was introduced in outside of the Palo Alto dealership down on University Avenue, just observing how people were behaving and what they were doing. And he would get together with his industrial design team. Johnny Ives headed that up every Wednesday morning at Infinity Loop, and they would pull out a prototype of whatever they had developed, and he would touch it, hold it, and feel it, and say yes or no, yes or no. So he kind of introduced agile development into hardware development, which was unheard of at that time. And that's part of the reason why Apple frequently will wait until the market's big enough for a big company like them to jump into, and then when they do, they take over the largest market share. Maybe not in units, but certainly in profits and or in revenue, which is what they continue to do with the iPhone and tablets and even PCs today.
But I would like to know, how did you stumble across product management? Back then, product management was not really a career path known like now.
Yeah, it wasn't as well known, but it actually started in 1938 at Hewlett Packard, and it was copied from a technical standpoint from Procter and Gamble's brand management, which started at Procter and Gamble in 1932. The difference, though, is that at HP product management, the product managers had full responsibility for the product or the product line, but none of the authority. Whereas the brand managers at Procter and Gamble, their budget was what was used for advertising, for PR, for market research, and so forth. So they could control those expenditures. But the product manager that came out of HP did not have that authority. I was recruited into Hewlett Packard in the corporate PR department in 1980 because I was an environmental mediator, and HP was having difficulty locating facilities and new sites around the country. So they asked me to handle that PR for them. And in the process, I had had word processors at the associations that I started dating back to 1971, which was a Savon word processor, which had it was an electric a ball typewriter from IBM, and they replaced the bottom of the typewriter with a whole bunch of solenoids, and then could record your keystrokes onto a cassette tape. So I was quite surprised that HP corporate PR did not have word processing. And I found that there was an internal word processing program called Slate that ran on the HP 3000. And I deployed it to the 32 people in the department because it was the PR department was about the only department in the company that knew how to type at that time because we were all journalists. And it turned out that the role I was playing was as an internal product manager. And as a result of that, I was able to transfer laterally into the Information Networks division. And they assigned me two products, one in the developmental stage called MOM, M-O-M. It was a master user interface running across HP's terminals and HP's personal computers to have a common user interface. And the second was a product about to be introduced called HP Inform that
Okay.
was an executive report writer that sat on top of Data Dictionary, which was on top of a relational database. So I got trained in the HP product management in that division, was able to watch a number of videos that were recorded by other product managers to understand what my role was and what I was responsible for doing. And then Apple was about to introduce the first hard disk drive on a personal computer. So they recruited me to go to Apple as the product manager on the Apple profile. It was a fantastic hard disk drive. It was really, really, really big. It was 5 megabytes in size, and it was really, really cheap. It only cost $3,500. And nobody could understand why they ever want that much space for so little money. And the company had so much confidence in it that they sent me to the computer show in Las Vegas, and I had to stand there and give a presentation on it every 30 minutes for like 8 hours on a concrete floor. I was so flat footed I couldn't stand for a week after that. The product was somewhat successful, but it would not work on a Apple II because when Steve Wozniak wrote the DOS operating system for the Apple II, he never thought that a storage volume would be much larger than 143 kilobytes, which is the size of the Shoegate floppy disk, which worked on the Apple II. And he didn't want to think about it too much because he only had 3 weeks to write the operating system. Otherwise, he would not get to go to Las Vegas for the Comdex show there. And that's the whole reason why he wrote the operating system. So my division at Apple was responsible for the quality assurance of a new operating system called ProDOS that would support a volume larger than 143 kilobytes. And in helping manage that effort, I bet Dick Houston, who was the engineering manager, that he would never ship this million lines of code on time. He says, "Oh yes, we will." And I said, "Oh, no, you won't. You guys never get this stuff done on time." And he said, "Does he want to bet on that?" I said, "Sure, I'll bet you you'll never get it done." And the bet was sufficient that he got most of his engineers working hard, and they actually shipped, but it was 3 days late. So he had to give me his coin collection as a reward for shipping the product late. So out of that, senior management at Apple noticed that I knew how to manage, and they asked me to come over to the personal computer systems division and be the Apple III group product manager. The result of that is that I was on the job a couple, 3 weeks. And at that time, Steve Jobs did not understand the concept of cannibalizing your own products. He felt that the Apple III, which he, by the way, was the first product manager on it, it shipped the thing with a faulty design such that the computer chips work loose in shipping. And they found that if you pick the thing up and drop it a foot, it would reset the computer chip so and the computer would turn on. Otherwise, it was dead on arrival. So it wasn't too cool to have a disaster like that. So he was removed from being the product manager of the Apple III, and they sent him over into a little building over on Stevens Creek, which looked like a Taco Bell, so they called it Taco Towers. And he started putting together the Macintosh team after stealing the design from whose name I forget who it was offhand, and running him out of the division. But he thought the Apple III was in the office market and the business market where he wanted his Macintosh to go. This was in the spring of 1983, and he convinced the executive committee to cancel the product line. And about a week after they canceled it, I had nothing to do, so I brought my golf clubs and putters into my office. And I was over at the corporate headquarters a few miles away. I was walking out of the building, and Ida Cole runs out and grabs me. She, at the time, was the marketing manager. And she says, "John wants to talk to you." And I said, "John who?" And she says, "John Scully, the president." Oh, I said, "Oh, yeah, I've met him a couple times." So she ushered me into a room, and Scully was sitting at the end of a very small conference table, staring at a super VisiCalc spreadsheet. And to his right sat Ida Cole, and to her right sat Del Yoakum, who was VP of Manufacturing. And across from him was Joe Graziano, who is the executive chief financial officer, or CFO. So Scully says to me, "Dave, we just found that we got $30 million worth of piece parts for 20,000 Apple IIIs spread between our manufacturing facilities in Singapore, Dallas, and in Cork, Ireland. What should we do about it?" And I said, "What do you mean, we, paleface?" And he didn't laugh. So I had to explain the joke to this guy. And I said, John, back in the 50s and 60s, there was a television show called The Lone Ranger. And he was a white guy that wore a mask, and he had one silver bullet, which he had to save for a special occasion. And he rode a white horse called Trigger, who, by the way, the actor that played the Lone Ranger is buried next to his white horse, Trigger, someplace in Southern California. And they were galloping through the desert in Arizona, and they got surrounded by 10,000 yelling, screaming Indians. And you got to remember that the Lone Ranger had a Indian sidekick by the name of Tonto. And whenever I tell this story to Indian Indians, I have to tell them it's an American Indian. And so they're surrounded by these 10,000 yelling, screaming Indians. And Lone Ranger turns to Tonto and says, Tonto, we're surrounded by 10,000 yelling, screaming Indians. What should we do, Tonto? And Tonto, using the slur name for an American white man, says, "What do you mean, we paleface?" So I said, "You didn't ask me, God, about what we should do with the Apple III before you went off and canceled the thing." And he says, "Okay, well, what should we do?" So I said, I told him the story of trying to get a promotion done for to affect Apple III's sales in the dealer floor. And I said I had gone to and took a part-time job at night and on the weekends at a local computer dealer in Fremont where I lived to understand what's happening at the other end of my efforts as a product manager. So I said, I put together a promotion and I took it to the promotions group within the division, who took it to a promotions group in corporate marketing, who took it to a promotions group in sales, retail sales, who then took the promotion to the sales force, who took the promotion to our manufacturer's reps, because that's how Apple was distributing, to the principal there, who then took it to the salesperson calling on the dealer, who then took the promotion to the principal at the dealer, and then maybe the principal at the dealer would take it to the sales manager within the dealership, who in turn will tell the salesperson on the floor what's going on. And I said, I rolled out one of these things several months ago, and I, on the sales floor at this computer dealer, have yet to hear anything about it. And in fact, most of the people on the sales floor don't even know where the data sheets are for the computers to offer to hand to the customers so they can learn more about what they're considering to buy. So I said, you know what it's like pushing a wet noodle? And John smirked a little bit. He said, well, what should we do about it? I said, well, there's a book out which I read just recently called The Soul of a New Machine. I think the company's name was Alpha General or something like that. It was a mini computer manufacturer in the Boston area. And they couldn't get the follow on computer developed because it was constantly being attacked and cannibalized by the existing computer. So they moved the development team to Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina, and successfully developed this new machine. I then told them the story of the IBM personal computer that they tried to develop that in the headquarters of IBM in Schenectady, New York at that time, and was always killed by the senior salespeople because all their commissions came from mainframe computer sales, and they were afraid that the personal computer was going to cannibalize their commissions. So they moved the development team as far away from Schenectady, New York as they could, but in the same time zone. And that's why the IBM PC was developed in Boca Raton, Florida, which is just north of Miami Beach. And I said they successfully built it. They successfully copied our Apple II, and they're on the market now. And they are now our major competitor. And I said, lastly, let me tell you the story of the Lockheed Skunk Works. An acquaintance of mine, Kelly Johnson, who was also from University of Michigan, but many years before me, headed up that group. And he convinced Lockheed management to just put him out there in the desert with an engineering team and a manufacturing team and leave him alone. So he developed the X1, the X15, the XB71, I think it was, or XR71, all these supersonic, highly advanced technological aircraft. and he could ship them in 18 months, while the rest of Lockheed would take 7 years to get the same thing done. So I said, if you give me the same authority commensurate with the responsibility for the Apple III product line, that is, give me the hiring authority to hire people to work on it, give me independence, give me my own budget,
And
we will
budgeting.
sell and budget. We would
Oh, wow.
sell the 25,000 Apple IIIs that we want to do, which would be 1/3 of all the Apple IIIs that were ever sold. So meanwhile, Del Yoakum says, Dave, your Apple III gets in my way on the manufacturing floors. We're trying to produce 40,000 Apple IIs, and your lousy 2 or 3,000 Apple IIIs are constantly getting in the way of the floor. We just got to kill the product line. And it didn't occur to me till later that the average selling price at a margin of about 30%, no, it was 40%, was $7,500 for an Apple III. And his little Apple II was selling for $1,800 at a margin of about 20%. So, in terms of profit contribution to the bottom line, instead of being a one out of every 2,000, equivalent 2,000 Apple IIs, we're actually 12 out of every 40 Apple IIs in terms of the profitability. And we were providing the money that Steve Jobs is using to develop his Macintosh without having to go out into the venture capital market again and raise the funds to develop that product. So Scully says, okay, I agree with you. Make me a proposal. So I did some research by getting about 80 people in the company to contribute information about the product line, manufacturing, engineering, sales, and marketing, and development. And on July 15th, 1983, a day that will live in infamy, at least in my mind, I was asked to present the options to the executive committee of the company. And somehow, I think it was Paul Daly, who's the head of my division, maneuvered to keep Steve out of that meeting. Otherwise, he would blow up that meeting too. And we presented to them five alternatives. One of the alternatives was the decision they had made previously, and that was to cancel the product line. Another alternative was to let the market decide if the product should continue to be developed and sold and manufactured and so forth. And I've always been a firm believer in let the market decide, because the market is far wiser and far smarter than all the MBAs that we had running around that we were paying too much. So near the end of the meeting, after I presented these options, Floyd Quammy, who was at the time the VP of Marketing and Sales, said, Dave, if a dealer calls you and we decide to kill the product line, or we decide to let the market decide, and a dealer called you, what would you say? Now, all these rumors had always gone out many, many times that the Apple III is dead, and so the dealers were really nervous about what Apple was going to do. And a lot of them picked up the IBM PC as an alternative to the Apple II, and we're about to pick up the IBM PC XT, which had a hard drive, just like the Apple III did. And I said, well, if you pick the one about letting the market decide, that would be following Apple values, where we have empathy for the customer, we have good management, we're not afraid to make mistakes, and we're trying to make the most user-friendly, easy-to-use product possible. I said, so if you decide to do that, that's what I'll tell the dealer. And I said, so long as the market decides to buy the computers, we'll continue to develop and support, service, and market them. But if you decide to cancel the product line, which I didn't have to say anything because in the back of the room was Ann Bowers, the head of HR for Apple, and she was married to Bob Noyce. I didn't know it at the time, but Bob Noyce was one of the founders of Intel. And Intel had adopted a set of values patterned after the HP way. And the Apple values were patterned after Intel's values and HP Way's values. And canceling the product line would not demonstrate empathy for our customers, which included our dealers who would buy the product from us and then turn around and resell it. And it would not. It would violate the value of good management. So I said, Floyd, if you guys make that decision, of canceling the product line, I'll give the dealer your phone number and you can explain it to him. And, and the executive committee laughed, and a week or so later, uh, uh, Ken Zerbe, who was used to be the CFO, has come back from Europe as the European general manager. And he calls me up and he says, I hear you know a little bit about the Apple III. We'd like you to be the business unit manager. I said, well, why can't I be the general manager of this independent business unit? He says, well, we can't call you general manager. We have to call you a bum or business unit manager. So they gave me 17 people and $4 million. Ken said I could sign for up to $200,000. That would be equivalent to close to $1 million today. And nobody would ask any questions. And we went to work, and in 11 months, we sold 25,000 Apple IIIs, generated about $600 million in profits, enough to keep about 1,000 to 1,500 overpaid Apple employees on the job, and uh, continued to market and develop the Apple III Plus and introduce that, and turned it into the third most popular personal computer in the world after the PDP-11, the Apple II, and then there was the Apple III at that time, and generate enough profits to help pay for the development of the Macintosh. So that's my product management story.
Maybe if you can take me back to the years in HP. HP have been growing for like 50 years, 20 years percent. It's just insane numbers. What's the
Yeah,
HP way? What's the secret? Is it product? Is it culture? Is it just timing? Is it luck?
no, they grew 20% a year every year for 50 years until Farona came in 1997, and they've been spiraling out of business ever since. The key core was the set of Apple or HP values called the HP Way. And Dave Packard, who I used to handle the PR for when he was chairman of the board, wrote a book in 1996 called The HP Way. And it explains their set of values. Take chances, make mistakes, you learn from your failures, have empathy for the customer, design responsibly, have good management, those types of things. And that said, when I was at HP and when I was at Apple and I went into a meeting and we were going to make a decision about something, I knew that everybody was coming from the same place, from the same set of values. And as a result of that, that's why they grew 20% a year, every year for 50 years. They also believed in the independent business unit. They felt that when an HP division got bigger than 500 people, it was too unmanageable. So they would break it up into additional divisions. And when I was there, there was about 40 divisions in the company. And when I was in corporate, there was only about 200 people in corporate. When Carly came in, she centralized all of the decision making into corporate councils that hamstrung all of the important smaller decisions that had to be made. And that's when the growth stopped, and they split off their old original instrumentation business called Agilent. And then recently they spun off their printers and personal computer stuff and to focus on management, IT consulting, and enterprises, and it's called HP Enterprise now. And they recently moved their headquarters from Palo Alto to near Milpitas, and then from there, I think there's someplace down in Texas.
So their secret is one, values, two, lean, small team, and I mean, just an insane company. We don't have such companies anymore.
No, and they pushed decision making down to as close to the customer as possible.
Okay.
And they told the salespeople and the support people to take the position of the customer and fight the bureaucracy at HP to get better products, better pricing for them, which they did. You try to do that at some other company, you get fired. Uh, but HP also believed that if society was going to give them the authority to have a business license and make a profit, then they have to give back to society in payment for that privilege, which is directly in conflict with Ayn Rand's, what was it called? I forget the name of her book. Yeah, Atlas Shrugged. And, and the current corporate captains of industry and the current MAGA Republican Party uh, profits at all you have to do is earn a profit, and the profit is your contribution to society. And I said, yo, geez, that's worked out well in terms of climate change, hasn't it?
But I mean, that's insane about the HP way. But can you tell me any valuable lessons that you got from working from companies such as HP and Apple?
Uh, that small is beautiful, that values are important. And in fact, I thought as I was writing my book, Building and Selling Great Products, I said, I wonder if values apply to my personal career. So I made a little table, which the first column was the 25 organizations I've been associated with through 55 years or so. And then next column was, did they have values? The next column is, did they follow values? And then the next column is, did their values map into my values? And almost without exception, if they did not have values or did not follow their values, an example of that would be Volkswagen. What was it, about 10 years ago, they started faking the emissions, the actual emissions from their diesel powered cars in order to throw off the environmental regulators. And when they got caught, senior level people who were supposed to be implementing VW's values, which was a very good set of values, it used to be on their website, it's not there anymore, caused the company billions of dollars in loss of brand and also in losses and penalties, and resulted in them having to build this charging network around the world for electric cars. And then the third column is, did my values map into them? Without exception, when all three lined up, that is, they had values, they followed values, and it mapped into my personal values, I thrived and I was very happy working there. But in those cases in which those things did not line up, either I got fired, which was a mercy killing, and I was very happy the next day, or I quit. So a friend of mine that used to manage my vacation rental condo that I owned in Maui, uh, he was the property manager there. He moved to Northern California, and I had lunch with him. And I told him about values, and I told him that story. And he went into his next job interview, and he started talking with his prospective employer about values. And he said they talked for 4 hours, they offered him a job, and he's been extremely happy ever since. So that's one of my words of advice to people in their careers is when you go in for your interview, after they've done asking you questions, you ask them, what is the company's values? And then you decide to go to work there or not.
What are the areas of innovation available today for product managers?
And let me give you about 16 areas of innovation that are available today for product managers. First, there's lots of innovation possibilities in the area of climate change. I just read, I think it's down in Australia, somebody using some new science invented a way to make clean hydrogen at 4 times less cost, 4 times more efficient than any other way. Autonomous vehicles is another one. Can you imagine? You don't have to park your car anymore. It's going to be driving around all the time when you're in a meeting or you went into grocery shop, picking people up, taking them places, making money for you, rather than sitting in a garage or in a parking lot. Food innovations. I think roughly 45% of all the food that's grown is wasted, adding to climate change. So there could be all sorts of innovations in growing food, producing food, distributing food, cooking and consuming food at home and at restaurants, and disposing of waste food in an environmentally satisfactory way. Then there's the pandemic and future pandemics. Then there's this notion of a digital twin. General Electric engines made a purely digital mock up of their engines, so that they were able to populate their engines that go on airplanes, jet airplanes, with sensors, and they could tell the operator when it is they need to do maintenance on it, what parts that are about to break before the engine blows up, and that type of thing. And now, using artificial intelligence, there's an effort to build a digital twin of a human being, which you can then run tests of drugs and vaccines. You could have the digital twin concoct cancer, and then you could build a vaccine or something to kill that cancer, and then test it digitally first before you do the mass human trials. And it could even get to the point where you can eliminate the need for the mass human trials, which means in a matter of days instead of a matter of years, you could bring new vaccines to market to deal with, for example, future pandemics, and or to build targeted cures based upon an individual's DNA and whatever disease is affecting them. Another one area is big data analytics and wisdom of the crowds. And that's where, what, of course, is being used to train generative AI. I just saw that ChatGPT is licensed Rupert Murdoch's publications to educate that it's AI. Now, that's really scary. I mean, all you have to do is watch 5 minutes of Fox News. It already has a problem. People asked ChatGPT, how do I keep the cheese on my pizza? And it recommended putting glue on it. So that could get out of control easily. Another area would be augmented and virtual reality. Another area is gene splicing. Another area is 3D printing. For example, I need to buy a piece of PVC or ABS tubing that's about an inch long, but it's 2.5 inches in diameter. I can't find it anywhere. They only make it at 2 inch and 3 inch. But I got this stack coming out of the wall where my laundry room is, and whenever my washing machine empties its water, it can't get down the tube fast enough. So I have to put a bucket under it in order to prevent the water from leaking down into my office underneath the laundry room. So if I had a 3D printer, I could print up a 2.5 inch by 1 inch piece of pipe, and I could eliminate the leak. Another area which I've already mentioned is artificial intelligence. Another area is dealing with changing birth rates, aging an aging population. This is something, of course, Japan is greatly experienced in right now. China is scared to death about the fact that their population is going to start declining. And in the United States, it's not well known, but there have been studies to show that our economy and our gross national product is growing because immigrants are coming into the country and fulfilling jobs that Americans that are born here don't want to do, like picking our food and cleaning our hotels and business establishments and stuff like that. Well, we've got a declining population as we have in some cities in the Midwest. The whole economy of that city is falling apart because they're losing the taxes and the marketplace for the local hardware store, grocery store, and restaurants. So I can see opportunities there for some robots to start doing some things. Then there's the whole digital transformation to begin to understand how you can digitize your business and do your business more effectively. I mentioned robotics. Then there's also innovations at the technological level and the platform innovation level. There's marketing automation, which of course is going to be infected by AI, fake voices, fake people, being able to detect that. And the marketing automation is to identify your target market and convey your value proposition effectively. And then lastly is the whole Internet of Things, the 5G rollout, which enables your car to talk to another car and say, please don't run into me. and other ways of the Internet of Things will revolutionize stuff. So that's 16 different areas ripe for innovation in the foreseeable and immediate future.
Oh God, that's so inspiring. I mean, we almost ran out of time. Just one last question. Um, Through my research, I saw that you donated money to University of California, David School of Veterinary Medicine for cancer research. Why is that important for you?
Well, I had a cat named Ivory, and she was getting sick. And she was a neighbor's cat, didn't like to live there, so she came to live with me. And I started doing some research as to what we could do for her. And I found to my surprise that the total spend in the United States at that time, this would be about 20 years ago, was about $40 million on veterinarian research on cats and dogs. That's it, $4 billion. Yet everybody has a cat or dog or two or three, and they love these pets and are devastated when they pass away. I think the average lifespan of a dog is about 13, a cat's like 15 or 16. So a few years ago, one of my two feral cats that I adopted, named Peekaboo, came down with cancer of her jaw. And I traced down a professor, a veterinarian researcher at the University of Minnesota, who had left there, that was an expert in cancer, feline cancer. And she recommended that I talk to Dr. Michael Kent at University Davis Veterinarian School. And I did, and he said, you have to bring the cat, which is about 80 miles away, into his clinic so he could examine her. He couldn't do anything because at the time, telemedicine did not exist was not legal in the state of California. Well, last year I lobbied our state legislature, and I and many others got a new law passed. So now we can do telemedicine for veterinarians in California. And he was doing cancer research. So I was lucky enough to have started buying Apple stock again in 2005, 2006. So I donated a large chunk of that stock to the UC Davis School of Veterinary Medicine, and they're using the proceeds from that stock to test targeted cures for dogs that have cancer. And Dr. Kent tells me that if that works, then they'll start testing it for cats also. So I made the donation because there's a lack of research, medical research, for dogs and cats and other animals. And about all the veterinarians can do is copy the research done for humans. But these are different beings with different systems, and it needs to be researched. So I was happy to donate that in the honor of Peekaboo to help the lives of pets in the future.
Oh God, that's such a wonderful story to end this episode on. Um, I'm gonna include the links for your Udemy courses, for your amazing books in the comment section, LinkedIn, Twitter, and your website. Anything else that you would like to target our audience to?
Well, we also teach product management and product marketing worldwide. I have several other instructors for Europe and for India and North America and Asia. And we'll do it either online or in person now that COVID is pretty much over. And descriptions of all of those courses are on my spicecatalyst.com website.